Thank you for the chance to speak today. My name is Marcus Dawe and I'm a Canberra entrepreneur. I absolutely love Canberra. I think it's a fantastic place to develop ideas and actually have a global view. I think Canberra gives us that ability from the kind of city it is. I'm going to talk to you about a venture that I started back in 2007 with one of my co-founders, John Beaver. And it's really about conversation, and this is a hallmark of Canberra, is these conversations you can have with amazing people. I was with the head of the Coal Association at the time in 2007, and I asked him, what are you going to do with all that CO2? We've got a massive amount of accumulation of CO2 happening, as we all know, and there's a counter you can go to, and you can see us heading towards that trillionth tonne of CO2, which is quite an amount of CO2. I think it's important to actually everyone to understand how much that is. It's extraordinary. We all know that we need to do as many renewables as possible, and let's just kind of win labs, and everyone just needs to roll out as many. But just a few months ago, Germany made a breakthrough with the amount of electricity they were generating, which was 22 gigawatts per hour in the midday section, but only represents 4%. I mean, of their total electricity generation. So to put that in perspective, they have more solar than everyone else in the world combined, and that's all they achieve. So we're moving there, but it's just not going to happen. We have an accumulating CO2 problem. Put in biofuel, fantastic, but at the end of that cycle, it ends up in the atmosphere as well. So what I did was, as an entrepreneur, I went around and talked to people from all different industries, looked at what was possible, prior art, all those kinds of stuff, and looked at, well, where does the Earth already store that CO2? Well, it came from fossil fuels. And when you look at it, the lithosphere carbon store is actually where most of the carbon is stored, massive amounts of carbon. 10% of the Earth's crust is in magnesium carbonate. So how can we get it back there? So really what I looked at and what my group has looked at is, how do we achieve a CO2 solution that meets all these criteria? It's got to be scientifically valid, can't be pie in the sky kind of thing. It's got to be big enough to meet the challenge. It's got to be permanent and acceptable. We found green magnesium. This is a type of rock. It's volcanic rock. It's highly available in Australia, highly available around the world. It's serpentinites, it's olivine, it's a whole lot of family of ores and rock that we could actually put the CO2 back into. Not holes in the ground as geosequestration, this is back into rock. So our strategy was to develop an alternative to geosequestration. That's where the coal industry wanted to go, oil and gas. They like these holes in the ground. We wanted to actually take it further and say, is there another alternative? I mean, that may work, but we want alternatives. We want options by the time we actually need to be putting all this CO2 away. So the other approach was we needed to get government funding before we went to industry. We realised that. So 2007, Inconvenient Truth hit, and suddenly everyone started to think about CO2, which is fantastic for us, but GFC hit as well. So we engaged with the University of Newcastle as our researchers. We developed up some interesting technologies around where to put the CO2, and we had it peer reviewed by Rio Tinto. What we looked at was industrial wastes. Combine a waste with a waste. Let's get rid of them both. We looked at all of these, steel slag, desal brines, which is one of our original ones we thought about. Hey, all these desal plants, can we make calcium carbonates? There's not enough wastes to get rid of the amount of CO2. Orders of magnitude more CO2. It's not the big solution. So then we went further into the prime mineral carbonation. Let's look at ore bodies all around the world where we could say, right, we do a quarry here, and we basically combine the CO2 with it, get the economics right, and we can start doing it for $25 a tonne and get rid of lots of that CO2. We were awarded $3 million by New South Wales Low Emissions Grant. It was the largest one they gave. They had to create the fund. We applied for it. I spoke at the CCS week in that year and suddenly announced this. We did all this in commercial secrecy. We didn't want the Chinese or anyone else to get our technology before it's ready, and it's still the case. Then the Commonwealth matched the grant, and we had Geosciences Australia peer review it, and they're one of our good advocates now, and then we had to seek industry support. Coal industry said, gave us the impression they would come along, but we don't meet their definition of storage, unfortunately, which is geosequestration. So we went out to a wider group, and we found Orica as an industry partner who were looking for a sustainability project, and we allowed them in. And where we're at now is we've just finalised our funding agreements as of today. 4 o'clock, we got all of our provisions approved, and we'll be starting in 2 weeks. We'll be signing in 2 weeks' time and then commencing next month. 6 years to get to this stage. Unpaid CEO, and we propose to build the world's first purpose-built mineral carbonation plant. Newcastle, at the old BHP experimental labs that they've got there, adjacent to the university. We want to know the cost of large-scale CO2 storage for our mineral carbonation, and that's really our goal. It works in the lab. It works on reasonable scale. We want it to work at 20 million tonnes per plant. And we want to then give the carbonates to building industries to do things like bricks and pavers that are compressed products, not fired products. So again, reducing the carbon intensity. And then we want to do a large-scale plant for New South Wales, which this is the design for. So really it's taking CO2 from wherever it exists, that's coal, gas, industry who's capturing it, and then take the feed. Now, we know we can site these very close to where the sources are, and that's what we're proposing to do. 50 plants around the world would get rid of 1 gigatonne of CO2 per year alone at a $23 a tonne. And if we can't get CO2 from the coal-fired power stations and the like, there's 5 challenges for the Richard Branson's Prize who are planning to capture it ambiently out of the atmosphere. And we can partner with them and then have remote sites. Thanks.